Hi, Mr. Worthke here again, and welcome to Organic Molecules 2, the second screencast in the Organic Molecule series. This is the last slide that you should have seen in the Organic 1 screencast. So let's move on to carbohydrates. Hopefully today, in this screencast, we'll be able to talk about carbs as well as lipids. So carbohydrates, CHO, they're composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's why I wrote CHO. The formula is C with H2O to the n power. Like C6H12O6, we put the 6 in the end, the C6H12. The monomer, or the basic unit, is the monosaccharide. Saccharide means sugar. Now, when we talk about sugars, we will know that all of them have a suffix of ose, O-S-E. Glucose, fructose, maltose, lactose, galactose, amylose. So all of those things are cellulose. All of those things are carbohydrates because of the suffix ose. Now, there are two forms of the monosaccharide. We have the alpha and beta form. So what is the difference between the alpha and beta form? That's an awesome question. So I'm going to show you a picture of alpha glucose and beta glucose and see if you can see the difference between the two. So alpha glucose is on top, beta glucose is on the bottom there. And what do you see? I mean, it's pretty much the same, but what is different between the alpha and beta glucose? If you said that the OH group is down in the alpha and the OH group is up on the beta, then you would be right. So what's the difference between the alpha and beta? It's because of the shape, right? These are structural the isomers of each other. So we have this right here. This makes it digestible, and when it's up here like this, we cannot digest the beta glucose, but we can digest the alpha glucose, all because of shape. So now if we add two monosaccharides together due to a synthesis reaction, which you have already, we have a disaccharide. Di means two. Now this picture should look familiar. You don't need to write it down if you don't want. You can just write glucose plus fructose yields sucrose with the removal of water. But now we have the formation of a disaccharide from two alpha monosaccharides so that we can digest them. Now the bond that is formed, the bond down here, is called a glycosidic bond. So bonds between any of the monomers has a special name. It just so happens that in saccharides or carbohydrates, the bond is called a glycosidic bond. And specifically, it's an alpha glycosidic bond because we can digest it because it's formed from two alpha molecules. So we add many monosaccharides together through synthesis reaction. We will form a polysaccharide. There are two main groups of polysaccharides, ones that are made with alpha glycosidic bonds, which we can digest, and ones made out of beta glycosidic bonds, which we cannot digest. So let's talk about the alpha glycosidic bonds, the polysaccharides formed through alpha glycosidic bonds. Starch is the main way that plants store their glucose for energy in the future. Now there's two types of starch, amylose and amylopectin. Amylose is just a simple chain of glucose molecules. Amylopectin has branches off of that simple chain of glucose molecules, so it's much more complex and provides more energy, more bang for the buck, if you would. So all organisms need to produce energy in order to survive. Plants just so happen to produce their glucose, they make their fuel, and then they use the glucose to produce energy, and this is how they store their glucose for the use at a later date. Glycogen is how animals store energy, how we store our glucose that we can use at a later date. And glycogen is also a glucose chain, but a very highly branched glucose chain. So we can store more glucose and we can produce more energy. For we need more energy because we're not plants, we're not sedentary. Well, at least most of us aren't. So those are all alpha glycosidic bonds. We can tell because this is the glycosidic bond here, and the oxygen is going down, same thing over here. So these are all alpha glycosidic bonds, and these are the bonds that we can break to produce energy. Now the beta glycosidic bonds, they're a little different in that if you take a look at the picture here, it goes down, then up, and down, then up, and down, and that's because of the beta glucose has the OH group going up. These are also known as structural polysaccharides, and although we can't digest them, they do provide structure and support. So cellulose is the main uh, beta-glycosidic bond, or the main structural polysaccharide. It's found in plant cell walls. It provides support for the plants, and it is the most abundant organic molecule on this planet, and we can't break it down. We cannot. We do not produce the enzymes necessary to break down cellulose. So this is our dietary fiber, which basically helps things move through our body and out of our digestive system in a timely manner. I can tell you in class how we know if we're eating enough fiber, but this is dietary fiber here because we cannot break it down. A couple of other types of beta-glycosidic bonds or structural polysaccharides, pectin and carrageenan. These are from algae and plants, and they're used as food thickeners. They provide a little firmness to our like yogurt, ice cream, but at the same time don't provide us with any calories because we can't digest them. They are basically fiber. They move out of our body in the same form as they went in. And chitin is the principal component of insect or arthropod exoskeletons, and they make them nice and hard, and it supports it really well. And this is what makes the insect pop when we step on it. They're chitin. So we cannot digest the chitin of insects. So if you eat too many insects, you are like eating too much fiber, and that's not a good thing. So that is the different types of polysaccharides. We have structural as well as the ones that we can digest. What are the functions of carbohydrates? Well, the first function and the main one is that it provides energy. When we break the covalent bonds of the carbohydrates to produce energy, we form 4 kcals of energy per gram. So when we eat carbs, that's how much energy we get from the carbohydrates that we consume. They provide support for plants as well as insects or arthropods, and energy storage. Starch and glycogen are great molecules for the storage of glucose and the storage of our fuel to produce the energy. So we're done with carbohydrates, and if you need to go back, by all means, please do so. And hopefully you can pause this as you go along to get all the notes. Lipids are the next type of organic molecule. Now, lipids are very diverse because they are not based on any type of structure, but they're based on solubility. All lipids are hydrophobic. What does that mean? Hydrophobic means that they are water-fearing. They basically have non-polar covalent bonds. Remember, so we go back to the covalent bonds, electronegativity. We can tie that into the type of molecule that we have, which are lipids. So a lot of carbons, lots of hydrogens in lipids. If you were water-loving or polar, they'd be known as hydrophilic, water-loving. There are molecules that have both hydrophobic and hydrophilic ends, and they are amphipathic. So when we talk about lipids, there'll be one lipid that is amphipathic, and we'll focus on that. So there are different types of lipids, triglycerides, phospholipids, glycolipids, and steroids, as well as waxes. And we're going to focus our attention on all of those. So get ready. We're going to focus our attention first on triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are made up of glycerol molecule, and the glycerol molecule is labeled in the bottom here, glycerol, and 3 fatty acids. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Now, notice the glycerol has a hydroxyl group here, and the fatty acid has a carboxylic acid group right here. Now, we said before that the functional groups are the groups that react, and sure enough, that happens here. When we add this glycerol, we have OH and H, OH and H, OH and H, forms 3 molecules of water, which are removed, and we form this structure here, which is a tri-3 glyceride. So there is 1 glycerol and 3 fatty acids. Yeah, I like you to draw it. I know it's going to be a pain, and I know you're not going to be happy about it, but we have the time. Hit pause. Now, fatty acids, there are 3 different types of fatty acids based on the number of or how much hydrogen they have. Now, saturated fatty acids we produce, so we do not need to consume any more saturated fatty acids because animals produce them and we are animals. The top picture is a saturated fatty acid. You'll notice that it cannot have any more hydrogens. It is completely saturated with hydrogen. Unsaturated fatty acids plants produce so that we need to consume unsaturated fatty acids. Now, an unsaturated fatty acid is right here, and you'll notice that it's missing two hydrogens because it has a double covalent bond right there. And carbons can only form four covalent bonds. So this carbon right here, we have 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So they have the maximum number of bonds, and they are missing two hydrogens, so that is an unsaturated fatty acid. Polyunsaturated fatty acids have more than one double bond, so they are missing a whole bunch of hydrogens, and we really don't need polyunsaturated fats at all. So they don't do I don't think they do anything for us. They can't hurt us, but the saturated, we eat a lot of. If you eat a lot of animal products, you don't need saturated fatty acids. Unsaturated fatty acids, you do. And we'll find out more when we talk about phospholipids. Hydrogenated or trans fats, we add hydrogens to polyunsaturated or unsaturated fatty acids, and they act like saturated fatty acids. And saturated fatty acids, basically, they taste good. It tastes good. And it provides a lot of energy, so that's why we like to eat them. So what are the functions of triglycerides? Well, the first one is energy. Like I said now, because there's so many carbons and hydrogens, uh, triglycerides can provide 9 kcals of energy per gram. So that's more bang for the buck when compared to carbohydrates, which only provide 4 kcals per gram in food. You can store excess energy, right? So if you have a lot more food, you need to store it. So for maybe a lean time, we have adipose cells that will take that in, store it as triglycerides or fat. Triglycerides provide us with insulation, as well as flotation and padding. The second type of lipid was a phospholipid. Phospholipids have, similar to triglycerides, they have two fatty acids. One has to be saturated right here. One is an unsaturated right here. And they have a phosphate group, which is right on top here. Notice this is a shorthand on how to draw a phospholipid, a circle with two lines coming down here, two tails. And the glycerol is right here. This is amphipathic because the phosphate is hydrophilic. The tails are hydrophobic. They are both hydrophilic and hydrophobic, so that's amphipathic. And they are the main component of the cell membrane. So that's the importance of phospholipids. So take some time, get the diagram, and hopefully we're set with this. A glycolipid, and that's what I'm going to focus on as we're talking about lipids, not the glycoprotein, that's later, is a carbohydrate and lipid together, in which we have one carbohydrate or protein, two fatty acids, and one glycerol. So right here we have the carbohydrate here, we have a fatty acid here, glycerol here. These are found in the cell membranes, and they can act as receptors, which we'll talk about later. So they allow the cell to communicate with other molecules. Steroids are not similar at all to anything that we've talked about before. They don't have a glycerol. They don't use fatty acids. The only thing about steroids is that they are hydrophobic. And since they're hydrophobic, they are classified as a lipid. Now, they are made up of 4 ring structures. So here's one ring, another carbon ring, carbon ring, carbon ring. That's 4. They are all formed from cholesterol. So cholesterol is given a bad rap. We need cholesterol for vitamin D. We need it for steroids as well as the cell membrane. So we do need cholesterol, but I think we just happen to eat too much cholesterol, which is a bad thing. Now, some examples of steroids on the bottom. We have testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. Now, the last lipid are waxes, in which we have one fatty acid and one alcohol. This is a wax right here. And waxes will decrease water loss to found on plants and insects. That's all they do, decrease water loss in plants and insects. And I'm running out of time. So if you need to look at this again, please do so. Thank you very much, and I hope this helped.